Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Today is the 18th. This is the Committee on Education, and it's about 2 o'clock p.m. in conference room 309, recess. Can we fix that? Okay, good afternoon. Reconvening for the Committee on Education. We had to work out some technical issues, but I think we addressed it. Again, today's date is the 18th, and it's about 2:05, and we're in conference room 329. We have 5 departments today that are going to give an overview about their activities and their future plans, so we're going to get started. We have a long agenda ahead of us. We're going to go out of order, members. First, we're going to take the libraries. Next, we're going to do Standards Board, followed by EOEL, then Facilities, and lastly, we'll do the Charter School Commission. Okay, so first we'll go with the State Library System. Thank you.
Can I share? Can you see that? Okay, great. Okay, so Mallory Fujitani, Special Assistant to the State Librarian. On behalf of Stacy Aldridge, State Librarian, she sends her apologies, she's quite ill. So thank you for the opportunity to update you on our program. Sorry, technical difficulties. Oops. Okay, there we go. Sorry. So in the last year, we have updated our strategic plan, our vision and mission. I think we provided copies to all of the committee members. I'm just going to run through this very quickly. We developed 4 areas of focus, which is strengthening literacy, igniting our digital future, creating opportunities for life enrichment, and deepening our community relations. Just a few interesting statistics from this last year. We see circulation exceeding 13% of just the physical items, as well as ebook circulation up 15%. We also see that as we are coming out of the pandemic, people want to come back to the library for more programming, and we have increased the number of programs. So we're working our way back toward pre-pandemic numbers. Just as an example, we are had over 92,000 people coming to the library programs. Here's some additional usage numbers as well. We also providing just interesting facts of the most checked out items. For this fiscal year, what we're working on, and in some cases these are ongoing projects. We are supporting Lahaina. So after the tragic fires, we reallocated our resources. Our Maui Bookmobile is making more visits to West Maui. We are working also with the County of Maui to identify the site that we can put up what we will call the temporary Lahaina library while we wait for the community and other decision makers to decide what the next steps are. We've hired a new security guard contractor for all of our libraries that have security guards. It's approximately 40 libraries have security guards at them. We have a new email vendor to to increase our communication with our patrons. We have over 900,000 library card holders. We are working on a rebranding and communications program for the library system to reach the public, basically, our library card holders and the public. We thank the legislature for the funding from last year's budget to do that. We've also launched a pilot project for one-on-one digital navigators. So in that case, we have 5 pilot libraries on Oahu. People can make appointments and get one-on-one in-person assistance with technology. And we also had we tested out a telephone call line service, and they were very, very well-received programs, so we're looking to launch this statewide. We are working feverishly to get our new RFID tagging system in place. It's a radio frequency ID project. Right now, everything in the library is tagged with a barcode. The RFID technology will bring us greater efficiencies. And this will be a huge help given that we are at reduced staffing levels with the labor market the way it is. And we're continuing to make improvements to our facilities so that we can provide better services for our communities. Our fiscal 25 budget requests are our security guard service, additional funding for fiscal 25. We are in we do have the new security guard service contractor. It's basically double what we were paying before. Last year, we received money only for fiscal 24, but we need money in fiscal 25. The $550,000 is actually not enough for the long term to support the contract and the current number of libraries. But right now, we penciled it out, and just the $550,000 for fiscal 25 will carry us through the end of the year. But we will need to come back next legislative session to ask that our base budget be increased substantially. We also are looking for funding, general funds for temporary locations for libraries that are under kind of larger construction renovation projects, which includes Princeville and Kaneohe. Princeville's closed for construction November 1st, around November 1st. Kaneohe, the estimated closure is going to be mid-February. And for the funding will basically help us to support a temporary location. In the case of Princeville, we have a portable on the edge of the property that people can visit for their resources. And then for Kaneohe, we have secured a space in Windward Mall. For Makawao and Lahaina, Makawao has a big renovation and improvement project that should go out to bid this spring. So we anticipate needing to find a temporary location as it's our only upcountry library. And then, of course, there's Lahaina. So the funding would help us get started on putting together the temporary location for the replacement of the Lahaina library, which we're looking to also do portables with. And then our CIP funding request is $10 million for the new Waikoloa Public Library. Last session, we asked for half of the money, so we were able to receive 13 million, and we are still on track. We expect that the Waikoloa Library design should be finished, and we'll be able to go out to bid in 2025. And so we expect that we can encumber the funds in time to eventually build the Waikoloa Library. And it's pretty simple. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you so much for being here. Members, any questions? Okay, go ahead, Representative.
Thank you for being here. I have a quick question. You mentioned the 5 pilot libraries for the navigational
Digital
systems
navigators.
program. Yes.
Yeah.
Which libraries are those 5 pilot libraries?
I need to check back. I know Kailua was one, Kaimaki. I'm sorry, it escapes me right now.
Any
I can
West
get back
Side
to you.
libraries you're aware of? Waianae Coast, Kapolei, Eva?
I can't remember.
Okay.
I'm really sorry.
No worries.
I'll
Okay.
find out.
We'll get back to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, go ahead.
I just had a question. What is the radio frequency technology? Like, do people just like walk out the door and it?
So it required our staff, we have over 3 million physical items, or about 3 million physical items. So every physical item is getting a new tag, which is our RFID tag. And we also have new gates for every library. There are self-checkout stations, and it's a low bandwidth radio frequency that is emitted from the tag. So actually, the checkout will be much faster. Right now, if you're familiar with the library checkout system, we have to open the book. Each barcode has to get scanned. With the RFID technology, you can put the stack of books, no matter how many, on a pad, and in like seconds, it'll scan the whole thing. So it'll really make it more efficient for the staff. It'll allow people to check out faster on their own, like even at some of the self-checkout, some of the grocery stores or whatever, they have self-checkout, you have to scan each one. This one, you wouldn't have to. If you've been to, I think, Uniqlo at Ala Moana Shopping Center, they have something similar. Like, as soon as you drop it in the bucket, it shows up on the screen. It's quite, I think people will enjoy self-checkout.
The way the system is going, self-checkout. Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I have a quick question. So I was wondering if you think that the space that is allocated for the library in the new building being developed in Wahiawa is going to be adequate for the library.
It's slightly bigger than what we have now. I think it's still relatively small from what we would like. Obviously, whenever we do renovations, we want more. So we're doing our best with the space that we have. We believe that, unfortunately, we were told that there isn't sufficient budget for all 3 programs to get what they want. So we all had to kind of cut back. But the community, we will be happy to get a refreshed library.
Definitely.
And a community space, meeting room. So we'll have that as well. I mean, so we won't lose the meeting space. But, some of these newer ones where we're building off a vacant piece of land, we have a little bit more flexibility to add on.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Vice Chair.
Hello. For the RFID new technology, my understanding is there may be either 1 or 2 libraries that's currently already implementing this on Oahu, but is the new gate system, or my question more has to do, is this already funded, or will there be a need for new equipment or a new gate system to implement the RFID?
So this program is fully funded in a prior budget year. Every library will have gates. So if you recall the previous gate system, not everybody had the same gates, and it was kind of harder to maintain and service. So the one active RFID library with RFID tags is the Nanakuli Library. So that one, it was opened in 2018. So that was kind of our pilot project to test it out. So one of the benefits we also will get out of the RFID technology, it will help greatly with our inventory management, because any given time it requires a lot of manual work to figure out if we're missing a book or where it is exactly. But with the software and the technology, it's a much quicker, easier, identifiable system for us.
Right. So it enhances both the checkout process, but the return process as well. Okay.
Yes, yes. So at the circulation desk, they'll have a pad. They can put everything on the pad, and it'll just do the read without having to open every book. And then we have at least 1 to 2, and at some of the bigger libraries, maybe like HSL down here in the Capital District, we might have more than 2 self-checkout stations where people can just put the stack of books on the self-checkout, the reader. And we have those at Nanakuli too. If you're out that way, you can test it out. It's kind of fun.
Then my second question has to do with like kind of what are the what type of assessment goes into like the conditions to be able to identify that when a new public library is needed? I know Representative Garcia and I both have communities that are still developing, like Ho'opili and Koa Ridge, that will attract thousands of new residents over the next 10 years. And so what kind of goes into that? Like, does it have to be state land, existing state land, or what is the process that goes into that?
So we are in the process of having an updated planning study done to determine, back in the 60s was the last time a long-range planning document was developed. And at that point, they looked at demographics, community, where the community was growing and all of that. More recently, the ones that have been identified for the new libraries, we really have been focusing on areas where there is growth, as well as is there state land that's available. It's significantly cheaper, but at the same time, really what is a problem for us, and we do worry about for Waikoloa, is trying to get positions to staff the library. That is really the hard part. So as all the state agencies and departments have struggled with hiring, we have too, especially in the more rural areas, neighbor islands. It is hard to staff with the right qualifications. So we've been spending a lot of time looking at other ways to bring in efficiencies. RFID will bring in a lot of efficiency for us. It's a lot of different issues, but we are working on looking at the long-range plans to determine where we would site a library.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Members, questions? Okay. A quick question. Is the Waikoloa Library on the $13 million that was appropriated, is that on the lapse list? Do you know?
No.
Any particular lapse list? Okay.
No.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead. Brett.
So I have a question about labor savings or the distribution of labor. So once we institute this new technology, have you done an estimation of whether or not you will need the vacant positions that you currently have? And what does that analysis look like?
I'm not sure. I would have to defer to Stacy Aldridge and Stacy Kaneshigi, who is our Public Libraries Branch Director. They work with the staffing levels much more closely than I do. I will say that I think the one thing that we do know is we have to get the system implemented to really figure out which areas we're going to save, we're going to generate efficiencies. I mean, overall, yes, it's going to be a more efficient system, but we do recognize that people's jobs are going to change too. And so we are trying to get ahead of the curve, just so that we don't want people to replicate the same process if we have this new efficient technology, and we're trying to better plan and make the assumption that we might not see a fully staffed positions for a while.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing? One of the things that we do struggle with right now is providing public service, because a lot of the time that the staff, especially when there's a staffing of like 2 or 3 people in a remote area or rural area, we struggle with them being able to spend enough time with the public and provide services. So we do know that that's one area where we'll generate benefits to the public, but it's harder to say overall bodies or no bodies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Quick question. You referenced that you folks are expanding your programs. Also on your slide deck, you mentioned that you are offering programs to strengthen literacy throughout the state. Can you go into an example of some of those programs so we can get a better idea? And also, are there any metrics that you're using to define the term strengthen?
No, I'm really sorry. I'm not real versed on this, but I can try.
Okay.
So we have in our budget about $100,000 appropriation the last couple years for the digital literacy, strengthening the digital literacy, and we are collecting data. So we contract out with support agencies, with people that have the technology support, and they're the ones we did the pilot project with. And so that's what we are using to track our data and to see how many people are using the service, what kinds of questions they ask. We're also developing, when we contract out, we also rely heavily on that survey that we did, that we received 18,000 plus responses. And that's how we're starting the initial development of the contract and the services we provide.
So this is specific for digital.
Yes, and then the survey actually covered quite a few other areas of services that people would like to see.
All right, and so for the $550,000 request that you have in your budget for security, can you kind of explain how some of that money is going to be allocated? And I'm thinking about some of the library campuses where it's actually challenging to even get inside the door because of some of the environment and activity outside immediately the doors. And so hopefully you're being intentional with how you're going to spend that money if you receive it.
Right, so in general, before we executed the contract with the new security vendor, we forwarded the list of the libraries. So we rely on the branch managers to tell us whether they feel that their location needs a security guard. So we start with that. One of the challenges we had with our last contractor was that because it was a low bid contract, the rate that we paid under that contract, we struggled to get them to provide services because they couldn't find people to work for that rate of pay. So now the contract is, we're using the state price list vendor contract, and that hourly rate is like double what we paid under the low bid contract.
That's the reason for the double in the cost?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And so we just started the contract on January 2nd, so we're working with the contractor as they transition, they bring in new guards. In some cases, they've employed the security guard from the last contractor. If if they were able to train them and to provide the additional level of service that we're hoping for with this more expensive contract.
Thank you. Members, any questions for the library's system? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to the next presenter, which is going to be the Standards Board, but we'll take a quick recess. You need a countdown? You ready? That's good. Okay, reconvening. Now we're going to hear from the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board. We have Felicia to present.
All right.
Thank you for being here.
Can you guys hear me? Let's see. I'll scoot this up. Good afternoon, Chair Woodson, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Felicia Villalobos, and I'm the Executive Director of the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board. I will be presenting today on behalf of the board, and I would like to acknowledge the board members who were unable to make this briefing in person but are attending virtually, as well as I would like to acknowledge the HTSB staff here today and in the office who carry out the board's mission and vision.
Thank you.
All right. So with that, I'll start with the board's mission and vision, and I just want to highlight one aspect of the mission is to provide every student throughout their educational career a highly qualified teacher. And highly qualified to the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board means a licensed teacher in that content area. Our board is comprised of 17 board members. One is a non-voting member, that's a student teacher. The rest are educational stakeholders that are on our board, including 6 teachers, which guide our work. The next slide goes into our budget. And we are not asking for any additional funding. We do thank the legislature for the 4 positions that will help our work with registered teacher apprenticeship, which we'll talk about in a moment. Again, one of the operation costs, if you look through the 3 sections, is not only statewide candidate support for our 14 educator preparation programs and their teacher candidates, but also looking at the initiatives that the board has approved, which is the registered teacher apprenticeship, and that moving that forward within the state. Next slide. This outlines a few of the things we do for licensing, audits and reviews, meetings, and organization. And I do want to acknowledge the stakeholders that we work with, including EOEL, Charter Commission, P20, the Department of Education. And again, to help resolve the teacher shortage in the state, it's going to need all those educational stakeholders to work together to move forward, including our 14 educator preparation programs. Next slide. Again, we maintain customer service. Our customers are the teachers. And we understand they have limited time throughout the day because of their role as an educator. So we like to make sure that they are a priority. Getting licensed teachers into the classroom and making sure we're providing excellent customer service by contacting them and communicating them within a timely manner is one of our goals. We also continue to have a walk-in service. So if a teacher is unable to manage our licensing management system online, they will walk in and we can help them, sit next to them and walk them through the application process, or if they have any additional questions. We also continue to provide presentations, licensing presentations for both in-service teachers and for teacher candidates who are going into the profession. Next slide, please. This is some data that we have for licensing, and it's over a 5-year time span. One of the numbers that has grown over the last 5 years is the emergency hires. Emergency hires only require a bachelor's degree. They are not fully licensed, and we are trying to get them into the educator preparation programs, and they have 3 years to complete a program to meet licensure requirements, and they would be considered a qualified licensed teacher. We do have 3 tiers of licensure. Pay is not attached to these. We have a provisional, a standard, and an advanced license. It's just years of service and educational degrees that would move them through the tiers. We also have different type of permits, and I mentioned the emergency hire permit. We also have a Hawaiian permit and a student teaching permit, so they're allowed to teach in the classroom. Next slide. We still have roughly about 20,000 active licenses. However, we only have about 13,500 classroom teachers. So there are a lot more people licensed currently right now than there are in the classroom. And there could be a variety of reasons. Hopefully they went into administration, or they're in some other capacity or with the Department of Education or some type of leadership role, or they may have moved or left the profession but still hold an active license. We are trying to gather data through our licensing management system. So when someone completes an application, there is a mandatory survey they have to complete, and it asks them questions of where they're at, how long they were in the profession, why they left, so we can gather more information of where they're at, are they in a leadership role, and this is actually going to help our educator preparation programs. So when this data is 5, 10 years down the line, we can say, oh, this institution provided, most of them went to administration or in some type of other leadership role, so we can actually go back and track where everyone's going. Next slide, please. Like I said before, we have 14 approved educator preparation programs throughout the 5 years. Last year, they did 737 teacher candidates, which means they outputted that many licensed teachers, 737. According to the Department of Education, I believe there is a 1,200 teacher shortage every year, and I know they're working on their side for retention and recruitment, but if you see the numbers don't kind of correlate, there's 737 coming out of our local educator preparation programs. There's still that big gap with the 1,200 teacher vacancies that are still there. Next slide, please, our bright spots. Again, I'd like to acknowledge who we collaborate with. It's usually everyone behind me in this room. We are working together to help solve the teacher shortage, and again, it's going to take all of us to do that. The add a field category down there that means a teacher was able to add another content to their license, which makes them qualified to teach another subject area and possibly grade levels as well. So, and that is advanced, standard, and provisional. You can only add fields if you have a full license. Another bright spot is our National Board Certified Teachers. We have licensing specialist Tracy Adika here, who's working with her collective to get more teachers nationally board certified. We did set out an invite, and again, working with other educational stakeholders to help put that together. The celebration is going to be coming up February 10th of all the National Board Certified Teachers who either renewed or just recently achieved National Board Certification level. And one of the things we would like to see with the collective is if they would like to be a mentor or a cooperating teacher. So again, putting the teacher candidates with a highly skilled and master teacher. Another part of Bright Spot is our work groups. The board allows work groups to come together. Those are the experts in that field to make licensure decisions or if anything's coming up with that field. So EOEL, the early learning, we have a work group for that. The Hawaiian work group, we have stakeholders that come to that work group. We also had an online and we have a CTE work group as well. So again, they're the experts in that area that we pull from the state in order to help the board make decisions regarding licensure, requirements, or any other additional things that are going on that the board can help with. Next page. Again, just talking about the teacher shortage because that is coming up every single year. The board has taken the responsibility of being the ones to start a registered teacher apprenticeship program in our state. And as you see from the slide, a lot of things are coming up nationally. We do attend national conferences to see what other states, jurisdictions, districts are doing to solve their teacher shortage. Some things that are in place that they say is strengthening clinical experience. Traditional route, your clinical experience, your student teaching is only done within a semester. They're finding that registered teacher apprenticeship, if you're under a master teacher for 2 to 3 years, you're actually going to stay in the classroom a lot longer, so it leads to retention. Also promoting teacher mental health as well as student mental health. We've noticed a lot of states have added that as part of the renewal process, ensuring that they have some type of schooling or education on the mental health issues and how they can better support their students as well as support themselves because they have to be mentally healthy in order to provide mental health support or at least know what the services are out there to give to their students or community. And again, professional learning opportunities. I know a lot of other states add that to the renewal process as well. We know that, and we sit on the Ready Keiki meeting, and we know that there's 200 teachers needed for the early childhood classrooms. So with our early childhood work group, we are bringing all the stakeholders together to see how can the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board help with licensing and getting those qualified teachers in those classrooms, especially if they're in that K-3 area and they want to become a preschool teacher. How can we get those teachers into that preschool classroom? We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So looking ahead for the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board, I've talked a lot about registered teacher apprenticeship, and we're excited about that. We know it's working in other states, and I actually put down some states that are putting money towards it. We have Connecticut investing $3 million, Florida $9 million. Tennessee was actually the one that first started with registered teacher apprenticeship when it was federally recognized a few years ago. They're actually putting $20 million to a Grow Your Own Center. And that is something that I think we could do as a state eventually. It would be just awesome to have a center of working on Grow Your Own and working with the high schools that have education pathways to start a pre-apprenticeship program to build them through that pipeline. If they want to be a teacher, we can work with them to get them through the UH system and achieving a bachelor's degree and going back and becoming a teacher here in the state. Again, the whole goal is to become debt-free. So you come out of school debt-free with all the skills under a master teacher for many years. The retention rates, research is showing 80 to 90% retention rate for teachers that went through a registered teacher apprenticeship program. They stay in the profession for 3 years, so 80 to 90% stay in the profession at a rate for 3 years, 70 to 80% after 5 years. So the retention rate numbers are there because they are, again, trained for a longer period of time. And again, it's always going to depend on that cooperating or that master teacher that they're under for those years and the wraparound services they receive. We know that some registered apprenticeship programs not only pay for tuition, they pay for transportation, some pay for childcare, they pay for laptops. They ensure that the wraparound services are there to get them through the program, including support with what courses to take, what courses they need to take next. So that whole wraparound services, we know it's working. Also, paying the mentor teachers or cooperating teachers. Some states pay $2,000 to $3,000 to these teachers to invest in this apprentice, so they can ensure that they are spending a lot of time, that they're getting the quality education they need in order to become one of those highly qualified teachers. There are other things that the board has put down. I wanted to mention Washington State and New York State. They applied for the SAFE grant, and they won $5.6 million from Washington State, and New York received $7.5 million. We did apply for the SAFE grant. We worked with the Department of Labor to submit an application. We did not receive it this year. However, we're still in the pool for this coming spring. So we're looking forward to working with the Department of Labor to resubmit our application. And we are asking for $3 million of that SAFE grant funding to start our program here with the teacher registered apprenticeship. I also want to add, next week we'll be flying to San Antonio. There is the first annual registered teacher apprenticeship conference that they're having. So all the states and jurisdictions are coming together to find out what's working, what's not working, what next steps. The board has approved to take OTM, the Department of Education's Office of Talent Management. We're taking 3 of their staff. We're also working with the union. They are coming as well. And the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board would be there as well. So we can sit together and talk how we're going to move this initiative forward. And that's all I have. So any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. Members, questions? Any questions? Okay, go ahead. Rep. Pruso.
So I thank you for your work, and thank you for being here. And I just have a quick question around churn. And I was wondering if you could speak to, you mentioned that the certification and also the support of something like being able to pull down federal funds for a teacher apprenticeship program would, in terms of the data, shows that it contributes to improved retention. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering, what is our context right now around that turnover?
That's a great question. I did some research, and the latest research I saw was from 2017. It costs about $20,000 to $30,000 to retrain a teacher onboarding. I'm not sure what that amount looks like here in Hawaii. That's something I can find out from the department. We can work together, because that would be an interesting number to have of how much does it cost to onboard a new teacher once a teacher leaves. I know the retention rate is that 5-year rate nationally known. And so what some states are doing, if you're going through a registered teacher apprenticeship program and everything's being paid for, they're asking that you stay in the profession for 7 years. So yeah, that $20,000 to $30,000, and again, that was in 2017. It would be interesting to find out the numbers currently today, and especially with the Department of Education.
I'm interested not only in the cost of onboarding, but the other hidden costs that come with having folks who are not certified, who might be emergency hires, who might not be fully trained. So is there any way that you folks collect data on for maybe personnel problems that arise in situations where you have high percentage of the faculty? So some of our schools have very high rates of turnover. And that not only destabilizes the school, but also the community. So some of those hidden costs, have you done any analysis of that?
Not in the state of Hawaii, but we understand that if you don't have a highly qualified teacher in the classroom, it impacts learning, for sure. We can try to look at that data and gather that for you, but that is one of the costs of not having a licensed teacher in the classroom, and possibly year after year after year of where that child may be towards the end of graduation. You also spoke about funding. We know that with registered teacher apprenticeship, not only pulling that federal funding down, but also braiding it with other federal funding. We've heard people are using Perkins, Title II. They're trying to pull from every caveat in order to provide that funding for those apprentices coming through. Also, because of the length of the program, some of them are getting dual certified. So they're going in either early childhood, they can get early childhood certified, as well as early childhood SPED certified, special education, or a secondary content and special education. So that makes them more flexible in their placements as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead, Rep. Todd.
Hi. So you folks, for people who are going through that process, there is a reimbursement program, right? $1,900, or how does that work?
So we don't have a registered teacher apprenticeship program right now.
Well,
That
this
might
is
be.
strictly for the national board.
Oh, the national board. I'm going to have Tracy Adika, who's our national board representative, speak to that. Yes, go ahead.
If this isn't the time for that.
No, perfect. You want to get the mic, Tracy?
Yeah, Hawaii teachers are actually really fortunate because the DOE does reimburse them upon certification. So National Board Certification now, it costs $1,900 for the 4 components. It can be done in 1 to 5 years. So the cost can actually go above that if they're not strategic and if they have to retake some components. But the DOE does reimburse them for the $1,900, which is the base cost.
Okay, and then just based on feedback from teachers, do you find that that initial upfront cost has been a barrier?
For some teachers, it has been, and I've been working with InPeace on the Leeward Coast, who is very much aware of the financial issues and things that the Waianae Coast is facing. And so they're upfronting for the Waianae Coast teachers, for the teachers who have shown that they either live on the coast or that they've got a commitment to the coast. They've found that sometimes the Leeward Coast is a beginning teacher ground and they come and they leave. And so InPeace was investing in a lot of teachers who didn't stay on the coast. So they're trying to be a little more careful in terms of making sure the commitment is there. But they're paying for their entire journey, including retakes.
Okay, because it does feel like, I mean, especially given the numbers, right? It just feels like very cheap if we were to just
Yeah.
pay for it. But then we'd actually have a huge increase, you would
Yeah.
think, right?
Well, the one good thing too, though, for the teachers is that National Board was also aware, right, that the funding was a barrier for many of the teachers. So they went from having everything due all at once. It used to be like when I first certified, I had to pay everything at once, as did Representative Peruso. And back when we did it, it was like $2,500. I know I took out a loan to do it. And then once I certified, I was able to pay off my loan. But for the teachers now, one, they will get reimbursed, but there's also a payment plan. So I am one of the teachers who maintained her certification this year. So I had to borrow a classroom, go into the class, do my videos and all of that, pay my maintenance of certification fee, which the DOE doesn't reimburse. However, it was a really important, I think, journey for me because it reminded me of why we do what we do, gave me the opportunity to reconnect in a classroom. But when I go in to work with the teachers, they see that I'm a National Board certified teacher, And I was able to make a payment plan, which is where this was started off going, because I didn't have to pay even my $450 for maintenance up front. I was able to do a monthly, no interest payment plan, so it was like $80 a month on my credit card, and I just didn't think about it. So it was an easy thing to be able to do. So they are also aware and trying to work on that. You're welcome.
And since we're talking about it, can you talk also about like the incentive structures that the DOE has to encourage teachers to be nationally board certified?
Yeah, that's another thing where I think Hawaii, this is one of the things that we have been doing right here in our state. National board certified teachers across the state get a $5,000 annual incentive. And that's on top of their regular salary at whatever level they're at. For those who are in high need areas, it's an additional $5,000. So for our teachers, again, on the Waianae Coast, or INPEACE is looking at increasing their ability to sustain, right, and to take care of their families and to stay in education, they're getting a $10,000 annual increase. So they get, the first stipend is spread out throughout the year, and then at the end of the school year, they get the additional for being in a hard to place.
Thank you. And, you know, I think as a committee, I would like to focus more on what the Standards Board does, because it's just such an important variable as to how we increase student learning. It's voluntary, but if every single teacher in this state and this country was nationally board certified, we would see significantly greater results
Absolutely.
in our student learning outcomes. Is there any other questions? Members are going to ask some questions, but go ahead, Vice Chair.
Hello, Chair. Thank you so much for sharing the metrics on a lot of the outputs in the past year. Are you also tracking additional metrics, like for the applications that were received, like how many were, either like accepted or denied, or the length of time it takes to approve a license?
Yeah, we're keeping
Or a
metrics on
permit.
applications, so we do have information regarding, sometimes they submit, because it's free right now for applications and free for licensure. Sometimes they'll submit an application, but then they don't have the qualifications, or they don't have the documents, or they're uninterested, so then they just sit there and they expire after 6 months. As for the processing time, I can get that information for you. Our team is pretty quick, considering other states that have maybe 6 months, 7 months, and we prioritize military, we do our teacher candidates in state, emergency hires, because we want to make sure that they're all in there. We do have teachers that want to add, but they already have a full license, they want to add a field. So they may take a little bit longer, but nothing more than 6 weeks for sure that we're working on. And again, it's always going to depend on the documents that are coming in, because we ask them for additional documents. Sometimes it takes them a while to upload those documents, but we try to process as quickly as possible.
Great. Yeah, we're always interested in those, like, either areas of improvement, and if you think
Of
there are
course.
ways we can help support to make sure that, we are hitting those goals. And then my other question was just, thank you for taking a look at what the other states are doing for the registered teacher apprenticeship program. I'm interested to see if, you're going to this conference next week, so let me know if you'll find out more. But like, how is the board in other states operationally structured when it comes to like looking at this, like from a recruitment retention like standpoint, like using this program? Because in the other states, is it they're attached to the Department of Labor, or is Department of Labor considered a partner in it?
So most states, Department of Labor is going to be a partner in it. So you go through the Department of Labor. We are considered an independent licensing board. Some boards are braided into the Department of Education in their state. And so we noticed that a lot. We just heard recently that the union in one state is taking on teacher registered apprenticeship. So it's depending on who the sponsor is going to be. Most districts, because we are one district, and other states, a district or a pocket will take on registered teacher apprenticeship. So they're working with their own department. So it's like a school at a time. We're lucky that we're one state, so we should be able to move everyone forward at once instead of by little pockets or by islands or complex areas.
But do you feel like in order to go for the federal funding, the SAFE grant,
Yeah.
like you
We
are in a
partner,
good
yeah,
position
we're partnering with the
Department
Department of
Okay.
Labor, and we had an extensive conversation with them last year to help them understand what it takes to become a teacher, because this is fairly new and fairly recognized by the federal government. So we've been working with them in partnership of what it would take in order to submit that grant. And again, we're going to still continue to partner with them because there's federal regulations when you start a registered apprenticeship program that we would have to follow and abide by.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Members, any other questions? Representative Pruso.
I just realized when you were talking about the military that you can actually provide data, and I know you don't have it on you because I think it might seem like it's coming from left field. But a couple years ago, we passed legislation that made it possible for military spouses or dependents of military personnel to work for the state or work for any of the counties without being residents. So they don't have to pay state tax. So I'm wondering, after we passed that, did you see an increase in the number of military dependents who went through the licensure process or had their license recognized by HTSB? And I know you don't have that with you, but can you?
Yeah, we can look into that and give you numbers. Did you want the 5-year span, a couple of years, so you can see the difference? Or
Yeah, since we passed it, so like a before and after.
After, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Members, any other questions? Okay. I want to talk a little bit about like the importance of going through the licensure process, and I appreciate that you mentioned there's pretty rigorous standards in place here in Hawaii as it relates to receiving a teacher license. And so besides like the coursework that's required, there's 3 ways to actually earn the license, 3 primary ways. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but there is observations that need to take place, and or a demonstration of proficiency through documentation. Another way, as I recall, is the clinical classroom work that needs to be done, 450 hours, or you can take, I believe, like a proficiency examination to assess your effectiveness as being a teacher. Who within the Standards Board actually conducts those services, defined as per their performance assessment that needs to be done? Is there a staff that does that? Is it done at the school level? Who is doing the observations within the classrooms, et cetera, et cetera?
So there's a couple of components to that. We have, and this is going to, the board has regulatory authority over the 14 educator preparation programs. So when a program comes in, they say, we want to recommend teachers in licensure in this area. What they do is we put a review team together and we look at the various components that they're meeting standards, how they're going to assess content, their clinical experience, ensuring that they're meeting the 450 hours. So it would be up to the educator preparation program, because the board and the reviewers will look at the entire program, ask them questions that they're making sure they're meeting all the requirements, including the requirements outlined in administrative rules. There's a list of requirements that every teacher that's going through an in-state approved board, EPP, that they have to meet. So it would be up to the institution to go in and supervise or look at observation, making sure they're meeting the 450 hours. We do have an auditing process every year that we audit some of their teacher candidates to ensure, and they upload all the documents. But for the most part, it's up to the educator preparation program that's been vetted by the board and approved by the board to look at where everyone's at for clinical experience. Sometimes teachers or teacher candidates need more time, so they won't put their name on the list for recommendation. They maybe need another semester. So again, it's up to the educator preparation program to monitor that.
Thank you. So that's up to the SATEP.
Yes.
How many alternate pathways do we have in the state?
Oh, many. All the 14 educator preparation programs, they both have traditional route and alternative routes. So we have the UH system, and then we have other programs like Teach Away, iTeach, TFA, and they're considered alternative route programs. So that's more of the, I have a bachelor's degree, I want to go back for my either master's degree or post-bac, or just licensure.
And how are you ensuring that those alternate programs are making sure that the educators are prepared for the classroom?
We do our auditing process, and it always begins at the very beginning of the vetting process. We do have annual reports due from the educator preparation programs every year. If anything's changing, if they're doing any modifications to the program, they submit that to the board for review, or to staff to review, and we provide that to the board. If they want to do any substantive changes to their program, it goes through a program review through our board and our staff.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier that, you encourage master teachers or resource teachers to work with newer teachers. Can you explain some of the mechanics as to how the board is interfacing with the schools to make sure that the mentors or the resource teachers are getting the support that they need so that they can support the new teachers?
Yeah, so right now the Department of Education is in charge of mentoring. We leave it up to the educator preparation programs to ensure they have the supervisor or cooperating teacher, they meet qualifications. Now, one thing we do not have, the board has not passed minimum qualifications for cooperating teachers like other states. They have to have a minimum of 5 years of teaching experience in the content. The board is looking at requirements minimum requirements for cooperating teachers. So one of the biggest things for registered teacher apprenticeship that we notice, and one of the failures we heard, is they have to make sure those cooperating teachers are ready to take on an apprentice. So they're putting in requirements. So we're looking at how can we, when we move forward with registered teacher apprenticeship, make those requirements and make it not only for the apprentice, but for all of the 14 educator preparation programs to ensure that every teacher that is going through a program is with a qualified teacher. So that's still in the works.
Thank you. With regards to national board certification, are you exposing candidates, are encouraging candidates, not that you have to, but it's voluntary, but is there any exposure to the possibility of going that path?
So, and I'll let Tracy speak to that because our licensing specialists do our presentations with our teacher candidates.
Yes, so one, every time I do a program or a presentation for one of our educator preparation programs, I make sure, and we all do, that there's a slide in there letting them know, first of all, what it is, because it's awareness. That's also one of the reasons why we formed our National Board Collective. So our Hawaii NBCTs is our National Board for Professional Teacher Standards local network affiliate. And then the collective is kind of the guiding body for it. Now, the National Board Collective has representatives from each island, except for Lanai. We're working on that. There is one NBCT on Lanai, but we've got a candidate there, so we're hoping we'll double the number soon. But one of the things that the collective is doing is reaching out to teachers in their areas. So by having them locally on each island, they become a touch point. And so what we're hoping to do is to have actual like symposiums or conferences at the local level where they can work with candidates as well as National Board Certified teachers. And then also through the collective, we've had our National Board Certified teachers who would like to be mentors, who have not had the opportunity perhaps before. They've signed up, and so the universities, the educator preparation programs all have access to a list of National Board Certified teachers across the state who are interested in being cooperating teachers.
That's good work. That sounds amazing. What percentage of professionals or semi-professionals are in front of our kids that are not licensed teachers within the DOE system?
Well, not licensed. I would have to go back and look at how many. It's all the folks that have a permit right now.
What is like a rough percentage?
Ooh. Yeah, it's going to depend by school, but overall, I think there's about, what did it say in the presentation? Let me check.
It was close to 900 emergency.
Yeah.
So all the emergency hires, that's the number I need to reference.
That and also Hawaiian permits, CTE permits, that means they did not go through an entire SATEP. But CTE is a little bit different, CTE, just because they're coming from the industry.
Yeah.
I can get you the percentage though.
And it's curious too, because why is there's a lot of alternate pathways for CTE teachers across the country, but how are those educators able to be very effective when the general classroom practitioner has to go through very rigorous training, observations, testing, assessments, et cetera, et cetera? What accounts for the difference?
So I haven't heard anything nationwide, but within our state, we're looking at, they're coming in from the trades usually, and when they are working with an apprentice, it's one-on-one. And it's very different working with high school and middle school students at a number of 30, 35, and then all the different learning needs and different styles. So the board wants to ensure that they have the pedagogy and classroom management to manage all those students, because if you're working with SAWs or things like that, you got to make sure you're managing. It's not just one-on-one anymore, it's with an entire classroom of middle or high school students. And so the content in which are coming in is not in question, it's the pedagogy. How can they take what they know and teach it to 25, 30 different types of learners?
Right, so how do
Yeah.
they do that if they don't have the
That's
training?
something we have that CTE work group right now, and that's what we're looking at and bringing in different folks to help us answer that question.
Thank you for that. Regarding, you referenced 20,000 licenses active. There's a shortage. How can we bring some of those teachers back to the classroom?
We're going to have to look at that survey data, see why they left in the first place. So did they leave because there was no housing? Was it because there was some stress issues? Was it admin? There's so many reasons out there that we would have to go ahead and look and then develop supports around that. Because again, we want to kind of stop people from leaving. If we can figure out why they're leaving to begin with, we can help, or the board can help, and use the educational stakeholders like the department, the charter schools, to help fix that situation. But it's going to take a survey and figure out why they're leaving to begin with.
When are you going to start that?
Oh, we already did. We already started the survey, but we don't have like 10 years of data or 5 years of data. We're looking at trying to get that 1 year of data. So it's in our system right now.
Okay.
We have a
It's
few
year
months
old.
of, yeah. So next
less.
year, right? Next
Okay.
year we'll bring that data with us, and it'll be a 2 year or 1.5 year data.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why didn't you do that before?
Okay, I just took over. No, that's a great question. And with our new licensing management system, just getting it in place. And so, and just hearing the conversation, not everyone knows where everyone's going. Our educator preparation programs, once they leave, they couldn't keep track of them. The DOE only keeps track of the DOE teachers. So because we have those 20,000 licenses, we can figure out, even if they have never taught in Hawaii, like some of them may have never stepped foot in Hawaii to teach, but they have a license from us. So those are the things we're looking at too.
Okay, I'm just kidding. You guys are doing great work. With regards to professional development, is that something that is a shared responsibility between DOE and the board, or does one or the other assume that responsibility?
Right now, well, actually, we work with the Department of Education. So Tracy put together some courses for National Board. One of our other licensing specialists did Model Code of Ethics for Educators to provide that for in-service teachers. So we work in conjunction with the Department of Education because it has to go through that process in order to be considered PD credits. We also do, I guess, a professional development for for teacher candidates before they go into the profession. So we don't have to go through the DOE process for that. That's more of us going out to them and presenting and bringing the presenters to them for PD.
And is there an alignment with PD offerings with academic standards or a particular type of curriculum?
No, not right now. We usually just focus on what the board has regulatory authority over, like the Model Code of Ethics for Educators, National Board. We don't do anything with reading and such. That would be more of the in-service portion of it. So in our administrative rules, there are certain criteria or certain areas that the EPP would have to meet. And that's what our board's responsible for. So if it comes to reading, we can go to the educator preparation program if their teacher candidates are struggling with reading and the components of reading. We wouldn't have really necessary control over all of the in-service teachers unless the board does something at renewal. Like you have to have this many reading credits or reading instruction credits for renewal, which we know some states do.
Thank you. And then lastly, because I know time's getting short, I want to talk a little bit about professional learning within the constructs of our DOE system. Can you speak about what you see in our DOE schools with regards to these types of professional learning opportunities, be it vertical or horizontal capacity, and also how you compare that to what you see in other states?
I haven't really looked at what other states are doing with professional development, but I can ask when we go to these national conferences.
Not PD, professional learning.
Professional learning.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of?
Like teacher collaboration, I mean, some states set aside time for teachers to actually meet and talk about what's working in the classroom.
Yeah, I can speak to my own experience in that because I taught with the department for 15 years and I recently left the department within the last few years. That collaboration time when I first started with the department was super important because you have a grade level or a department with either young teachers, seasoned teachers. So that collaboration and ensuring that we all understand what's going on, the standards, how to move, all those ideas. It changed towards the end, when I was leaving the Department of Education, it was more data-driven, which is fine, but I would have liked more collaboration with my teachers and maybe do data every once in a while. Because again, that articulation, we would have to do after school hours, or in the morning or at lunch, to have that I guess, talk story of what's going on, what's working, what's not working. So, and it's also going to depend on the school and the principal. I would have liked to seen more articulation if they had all the first grade teachers, because that was where I left, come together within that complex or district area for one of those PD days that the department has. If we all came together as first grade and we bring one thing that's working well and one question, it would have been great to have those conversations on Kauai. Or if the science department of all the high schools on Kauai got together and had that, what's working, what's not working, because that's how we learn. We learn from each other. And one of our biggest things for reading, I learned actually from another teacher. And we implemented in our school and our grade level. So yeah, that collaboration time is important. I'm not sure what's happening nationwide, but I can speak to other agencies to see how they're helping facilitate that.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question. We talked briefly about teacher training in the UH system and how right now they can't start in a community college. They can't start in my community college and make it through in 4 years. So they can't, the credits don't transfer. It's not set up to allow people that go to community colleges across the state to become teachers in a reasonable amount of time. And I spoke to Terry Locke about this, and she said that they were working to try to address it. I was hoping that you folks could become involved in that as well and keep us abreast of what the timing is. And I just think it is, given that we need to train so many teachers, to exclude any community colleges from that process seems very inappropriate. And so I'd really like to change that.
I agree, and I also heard the same thing, that they're working on it. And with registered teacher apprenticeship, and if we're going to start a pre-apprenticeship from high school, that articulation, that conversation is going to need to happen. That's going to be required. So I know at the last TECC committee meeting with Dean Murata, that's one of the goals, is to collaborate and work together to make sure that there is a pathway from community college and even as early as high school community to the 4 years. So that conversation desperately needs to happen.
Not certain community colleges or certain high schools. I guess it could be certain high schools. You wouldn't necessarily have that program in every high school, but every community college would
Yes.
have that pathway. 'Cause
Correct,
now,
yeah.
when I spoke, she said, I've had people say, oh, no, you can do it at Honolulu Community College.
Yeah.
But people don't necessarily know what they want to do when they start, and then they will not choose teaching because they see, oh gosh, I can't do that in 4 years. I'll pick something else.
Yeah, and I'll bring that information back to our TECC committee, which a lot of the educator preparation programs come from those institutions, and how can we start having that conversation and bringing everyone together to address that issue. Yeah.
Thank you. Rep. Pruso.
Quick question. Last year, we had an issue with TFA, and they were placing teachers in special education settings when they did not have a special education program, which is in violation of federal law. So I was wondering, and we have seen a proliferation of SATEPs. So are they on probation, or how is that situation being handled? And then the state is also subsidizing TFA, and no other SATEPs to my knowledge. And I'm wondering why that is. If you can answer both of those questions, that'd be great.
Yeah, for the, when the board looked at their accreditation, they did give them some conditions to their 7-year accreditation for TFA, for placing their teacher candidates in special education lines, or I guess the school was doing that because they're hired as emergency hires. So there are conditions in place, and I can provide that new business item for you. As far as the money that they receive, I believe that's contracted to the Department of Education annually. So they would speak with them about, because our Hawaii Teacher Standards Board does not give them any money. It goes to the Department of Education, and I believe this past contract was 1.6 million.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
What are the conditions? You said that there's a 7-year probation period for
Correct.
these teachers.
They're turning in where their teacher lines are at. They're submitting a lot more documents. So when we audit educator preparation programs, we audit a percentage. We're auditing out now all their candidates. We're ensuring that they send a letter to the principal or stating that they're not allowed to be put in special education lines. I can provide that new business item for you. It outlines all of the conditions that the board has put with their accreditation.
But these teachers are, in fact, teaching in special education classroom settings.
No longer. They're no longer,
They
I
are not.
believe, yes, correct. With the
Okay.
new business item, they have to make sure that they're in the correct lines now. So if they are going to be recommended in English, 612, they're in an English classroom, 612. They're not in a special education line.
Okay. That's appropriate.
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you. Quick recess. Thank you so much for reconvening. Next, we have the Executive Office of Early Learning with their presentation. UAL, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Yuko Arikawa Cross, Director of the Executive Office on Early Learning. Happy New Year, and mahalo for providing me the opportunity to share some information with you today. I'd like to introduce Jordana Ferreira, our Government Affairs Specialist, Ku'ulei Kaluhiokalani, the lead of our EOL Public Pre-K program, and Tara Castrovinci in the back, our Communications Specialist. So the Executive Office on Early Learning's statutory responsibility is to coordinate the early learning system. We currently work with many partners across state departments, agencies, and community stakeholders to effectuate that responsibility. Investing in our youngest children yields tremendous benefits both in the short and long term, and we are grateful for the legislators' investments in our field, especially over the course of the last few years. Ensuring children have access to early learning opportunities not only supports healthy brain development, enhancing children's growth and well-being, but also ensures families have opportunities to work and continue their education. Early learning programs also provide jobs, bolstering Hawaii's economy at large. As such, EOEL is committed to our vision and ensuring every child has access to early learning opportunities. So we accomplish our vision in two main ways: by improving the system as a whole and by administering the EOEL Public Pre-Kindergarten Program, which is done in partnership with the Hawaii Department of Education. As part of our systems work, we also hold the Head Start State Collaboration Office Director position within our office. And this liaison works with other Head Start grantees to ensure that we are leveraging those federal funds and supporting our communities that could benefit from Head Start programming. At the start of the biennium in the last session, we made significant requests to increase EOEL public pre-K opportunities. Thanks to your advocacy and support, we were able to secure funding for 55 additional classrooms to open by school year 24-25. We're excited to announce that 11 of those classrooms opened 1 year earlier, and we also had one additional classroom open on January 8th of 2024. As of today, we have 49 classrooms in operation, and this school year, due to Act 171 passing last session, we were also able to enroll 3-year-olds to be on par with the charter schools, and also to come alongside the Department of Education's Early Childhood Special Education that accepts 3-year-olds from the time they turn 3. This would not have been possible without the tremendous work from our EOEL and Hawaii DOE team, who worked diligently over the summer and into the fall to quickly figure out how to fill necessary positions, to prepare all staff to take on the administrative tasks necessary to open, and to enroll interested families. This would also not have been possible without the Lieutenant Governor's support, the School Facilities Authority and their team, and our many community partners who helped share the news about the new classrooms with families. I wanted to share some highlights about our stipend program that is growing in popularity, I would say. In summer, we had 21 applicants. In the fall, we had 70 applicants. And this spring, we had 179 applicants. And so we know that the word is going out, that people are interested. And I just want to express my gratitude for appropriating the $660,000 in the last legislative session. So we are happy to share that we're on track to open the remaining 43 classrooms in August for a total of 55 new classrooms to be in operation by next school year. These additional classrooms will serve an additional 1,100 children across the state. And we do not have any additional funding requests for this supplemental year because everything that was appropriated in the last session adequately funds our current initiatives and priorities. We are going to be making a proposal to amend our pre-plus program portion of our statute. And currently, we are able to offer pre-plus contracts on DOE campuses. But what we would like to take a look at is being able to open up more affordable opportunities for families to access an array of early learning programs that best meet their needs on additional public properties across the state. And this is the end of our very short presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Member, any questions? Okay, I have a couple questions. And so I think it's important to mention, you said that the funding that EOEL had asked for was actually appropriated last year, but for the edification of the public, that also can change. And so I know that as long as we keep that funding in place, then we're going to be on track. We're going to be 2/3 of the way through our stated goal of 100% by 2032.
Yes, you're correct.
Okay.
So you're absolutely correct. So while it was appropriated at the beginning of last session, we would need it to remain in place for this upcoming school year. And yes, if the funding in our budget remains the same for EOEL preschool programs and the preschool open doors, we will be at 2/3 of the total 100% access goal.
Okay, and so those funding line items are 19 million, correct me if I'm wrong, for pre-K, and I believe it's 38.8 for preschool open doors. Jordana is shaking her head
Okay,
yes.
sure.
Okay, good. And so we're very grateful to EOEL and Preschool Open Doors for your folks' work. We're, I think, working together to reach our goal. One of the gaps are that for our preschool teachers, they're not getting paid commensurate to that of our pre-K teachers, which is the difference between public and private side. We know that there's going to be a proposal to increase potentially preschool private side teacher compensation. Do you have an idea as to what that number needs to be per hour to attract and to retain those teachers?
Absolutely. So when we're looking at the figures for compensation, we support providers being paid at least $17 an hour. And the RAND study stated that wages should increase at least $2 to $4 per hour to meet the $17 per hour target. And so with about 4,400 active individuals in licensed care, a $2 increase will total about $18 million. And a $4 increase will total $36 million.
Okay, that was my next question. Thank you for that. I have no other questions. Members, any questions?
We just jump into questions?
Yeah, we're on EOEL.
Oh, I'm interested in those numbers. Like, is there, can you share those with us? Like the projections for, for helping with retention, any of those types of studies that you've looked at, and then if you compared it with other states as well?
Yes, we can get that to you.
And then, I know I did have a question. Oh, for the proposal for, how many did you say you would probably need? You're trying to look at policy this year to change and allow us to build in other public, is it just this public public spaces, right? So we're not looking at like church lots or private lots, but can you explain a little bit more? And then what would be the cost for that? Those would be new builds, right? It really depends if there's infrastructure in place for those areas.
So right now, our pre-plus contract are issued on Department of Education campuses and existing vacant spaces. So what we're looking at is being able to provide contracts outside of DOE campuses into existing spaces, and we're not asking for any funds to accomplish that.
Okay, have you gone through some type of study? So I'm assuming we looked at the existing space and we don't currently have the space needed to meet the annual requirement. And so did you look at did you kind of map or like look at other public spaces where we could, fill those and build out new classrooms? And you're saying that the funding is would still be appropriate to build in those new parcels or new
So
areas?
right now we're not necessarily asking for like a new build. We're
Okay.
just looking to be able to utilize underutilized spaces right now. So when you're on a DOE campus, sometimes enrollment fluctuates. And so if enrollment goes up, then sometimes schools have had to ask in the past, like Head Start providers, can you please step off campus for a little bit? We're going to have an increase in enrollment. And so it doesn't always provide the surety to different providers to operate on a DOE campus through a pre-plus contract. But if we were to use, let's say, underutilized spaces, let's say, for example, at a library, let's just say, it's not on a DOE campus, it's a space that already exists. And so how can EOEL help to support the greater community at large and able to use these underutilized spaces at this time? That's just one example. I'm not saying I spoke with them yet. I'm just giving it as an example.
So do you currently have a list of underutilized spaces that you'd like to propose when you change the language in statute to be able to look at other public spaces?
So we're not actually targeting any specific places at this point in time. What's going to happen is that actually after we open, when we look at how we are prioritizing communities for expansion, it would actually fall along those lines. So once we secure the remaining funds to open up the remaining 44 sites. And also after we open and fill the vacancies, then some numbers are going to kind of shift around with communities, access and opportunity scores potentially. And then we'll take a look at that and see what is available in those communities.
Oh, so the current process is to identify where there are the highest areas of need, and then kind of in those like areas, then go through which DOE sites are available and then open it up to, how long does that process take?
It could be DOE or it could be other state or county possibly land. And so right now we already have agreements with our pre-plus contracts, and we already know which campuses we have, and they have been really great partners. And so we're not looking to change anything that exists right now. We're just looking to expand it beyond DOE property at this time.
And there's a bill currently. Is there a bill being proposed to change the language that we need to pass this session?
Yes, we do believe it will be on the administrative package. I can't guarantee that until Gov sends that package off to the legislature, but it should be in there. If not, I believe it will be introduced either way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good discussion on the proposal. Members, any other questions? Seeing none, recess. Thank you so much for reconvening for the School Facility Authority. Next, thank you for joining us. Please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Chad Keone Farias, School Facilities Authority. Good afternoon, Chair Woodson, Vice Chair LaChica, Representative Martin. Nice to see you all. And we have a pretty short presentation today. This slide just talks about who we are. As you know, School Facilities Authority, created in 2020, began with a very small board. Our board members are here: Alan Oshima, Harold Edwards, Bettina Maynard, Edmund Axon, and Jani Wase are the 5-member board. We began with four positions funded. I was hired as the authority's first employee. We later added a deputy director, Alasin Kunishige, a policy and program officer, a business manager, and we have 3 project managers now. We're in the process of hiring for the next positions: purchasing specialist, a planner, land agent, office assistant, and some information technology specialists. And we have funds. We have been funded for that. We just completed our first strategic plan. We'll be sending you copies, and I hope you guys have some time to review that. The areas of focus, the strategic plan for 24 to 28 outlines our areas of focus, and it has some goals, 3-year and 5-year goals. You'll see that in there, goals around educator and workforce housing, around public pre-K, and the development or design and development of new schools. So some of the work that we've done, as you heard from EOEL, we began a process to renovate classrooms on the DOE campus to expand public pre-K while looking at the expansion of new builds as well. Director Cross shared that we opened the first 11 in August of 2023, another one on January 8th this year. We have around 7 more completed of our next 44, and we'll be on task to open that 44, having expanded by 55 classrooms in about a year and a half. And we thank EOEL. We thank the DOE for their accommodations. They have pushed really, really, really hard. It took us a while to get to the first 37, so this is a huge accomplishment. And also thankful to our partners who helped us get to that. We have plans to continue on that pace of 40 to 50 classrooms a year by 2032. Educated workforce housing, as you guys know, and thank you very much. It made it through at around 170 million last year. That was cut by 120 to 50. That was recently cut by 45 more to 5 million, with the promise that the 45 million will make it through some kind of bond funding through this year. So we've continued to work on workforce housing. We issued our first RFP in December and had our first pre-proposal conference today with 11 firms participating to bid. It was a great conference, very, very exciting, and very quality individuals and firms that came to the table. So we're hoping to see some success. The timeline for that would be sometime in May. May 17th, we'll close the bid process, and then we hope to select sometime in June for contract award in July on that 50 million. We also have the possibility of issuing a RFQ for Maui County. We have some details we have to work through over the next few weeks, and we've participated with Maui County for permanent housing task force and in their joint housing task force. And we have nothing to report on the joint housing task force other than those initial 8 lots that were once considered by DOT, HHFDC, and DOE that were upper Mauka in Lahaina. Yep. And then new schools, we have legislation for elementary and middle, the planning of elementary and middle school in central Maui, and some monies for East Kapolei. And we began some conversations with consultants and A&Es on Maui. We have no site selected and don't have the final data on what grade components, K6, K5, or K8 for Maui. I think the DOE shared some information on East Kapolei, but they began this work around 6 years ago with initial funding of $5 million with a firm selected. and we will pick the ball up from that firm once we get that information to move forward on East Kapolei. I did visit a site with Kaz Shantijima, but haven't had any more conversations, any further conversations. Our last communication sometime in December. And that's it from our presentation. I am available for questions.
Thank you for being here. Members, any questions? Okay, please go ahead.
First, I want to thank you for your work at Blanche Pope, past and future. Much appreciated. My question is about the teacher housing, which I'm very interested in for my district, but I don't have a good idea, like how much space, how much housing do you get out of how much space? And so I wondered if you could share in Mililani, like how big the area is and how much housing is going to be there and what kind of format it is. Is it 1 bedroom? Is it 2 bedroom? Or what is it like?
Okay, great question. So the way we wrote the RFP, and the word for today's pre-proposal conference was the word flexibility. We had a lot of developers come to the table with varying ideas. The legislation did say Nanakuli, Waipahu, Mililani, Ko'olaupoko, and the remaining counties. So we did some assessment of that. We worked with HST for a little bit. They suggest that this area in central Oahu would have the highest density, and it would be where teachers would want to live. When we spoke with the principals of those 3 campuses, all of the principals were very open-minded. Principal Murphy had a very global view, right? He started our meeting today saying, this is not for Mililani. This is a place on Mililani for the entire island, specifically pointing out the corridors to North Shore and down to the Waianae coast, and noting that teachers would want to live in Mililani and work in those areas. So that's kind of why Mililani was chosen. It is also a big swath of land. It's a large campus. There are 3 sites in the RFP for Mililani. So each of those sites vary. Site number 1 having, from preliminary work, showing the highest density and the greatest access. And in this RFP, we're asking developers to come with those proposals to us in terms of how many units.
Like how big a site is it in terms of like square feet or however you would measure a piece of land that size?
And so depending how they present it, but this is not large pieces of land. We're looking at the largest part being around 30,000 square feet. And the principal does not want us to take all of that. They're hoping for future legislation to have a, what did he say? Like a performing arts center adjacent to that. So he's not really offering up all of that space. So and we talked about that with the developers today. So we've seen drawings though in the past.
So what can you put in 30,000 square feet?
And depending on the heights that they want to go, probably 6 or 7, it's probably be closer to 6 stories. And
But I'm thinking of my district, it would be 2 stories.
yeah, for your area, 2 stories on a 25,000 square foot that we looked at on Maui was 27 units. So, and that seems to be the smallest number that people, so this teacher housing would not be operated by SFA. That's not why we were created, and that's not what's in the statute. DOE does not want to operate that from what we saw, and I don't think they should be in that business. So this is a DBOM, right? A design, build, operate, and maintain. So the density around 27 seemed to be where people were willing to take on the maintenance and operations of a facility. Anything smaller might not be cost effective. And we do want to keep that to 100% AMI, or less. We're talking, we want to attract, we want to retain new teachers, right? We want to have them here for 5, 6, 7, 8 years in these facilities and able to save some money and, I say buy a place here, but try at least. And that would ensure that they stay their entire 30, 35-year career. So definitely possible.
Thank you. So this is all lease space for teachers.
This would be rentals. This wouldn't be selling off of our schools. Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? I have okay, go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Will SFA now be covering all new school construction?
Yeah, so I
From
think
now
by
on?
design, that was how it was designed, to do all new construction. This transition, we figured the transition would be a little awkward because the DOE still has a bunch of new construction that they're completing. We have some assignment of new design monies, but yet in last year's ledge, and it continues, that monies for constructions are going both ways. So there's nothing in the statute that doesn't allow each agency to do it. But it is, I'm certain that it wouldn't be as effective having two agencies. You'd want one to become very good at doing its thing and another to become very good at its thing. But I hope that answers your question. We would like the SFA to grow and be so effective and efficient that it could do all new construction.
Yeah, just planning purposes for my area of growth in Core Ridge, because we have dedicated, state land there for a planned school. Okay. My question is on because of all the attention on the CIP lapse and spending. So, can you tell us and describe how you're currently monitoring, the CIP spending? What is kind of your own review process, and then how are you monitoring that projects are being delivered on time and on schedule, and if there are any anticipated challenges whether you're not going to be able to meet any of those, how is that communicated between all the parties kind of involved?
Great. So good question. Right now we've adopted a few of the programs that the DOE we're using. I still are using CPT and Procore. We've added components to that, partnering with Data House and Pacific Point, a Salesforce platform that shows all of our projects. It's partially in real time. It's a day or two delayed, depending on project management input and my review. We've caught a few mistakes in the pre-K process, so we have a secondary review. So that's how we're going to monitor it. In terms of the funding that's given to SFA, we plan to expend the entire educator workforce housing, 45 million that we have, or 50, and the money for the pre-K is in special. It will lapse into the SFA special fund, and so we'll monitor that in the cadence of 40 to 50 classrooms per year. In terms of the new schools, we haven't designed these schools yet, and the Maui monies, the monies for Central Maui had come over to SFA, and that is the one that we're watching that could possibly lapse in June. And without a site and without a specific ask, right, we started communication with our A&E firm, and they asked a set of questions that we haven't received the answers for. What is the grade levels? How many students and where? Mm-hmm. So it is a relatively small amount of money and very few projects, so we can monitor that very easily right now. Going forward, we will use these we'll use these current platforms with complete transparency.
And these are the same platforms as the DOE, or you're implementing specifically a new type of
so
platform for SFA?
we picked up from that and used
Creating your
a
own?
new platform. We are using the DOE platforms for the construction reports, because these are, right now it's their facilities, so they need to have that, and for the monitoring of our funding. So they know that we're attached to the DOE, so the monies flow. We sign off as our own procuring agent, but it flows through the DOE.
Thank you. And then the goal for this new platform is to have this data available, kind of more real-time monitoring the timelines and the construction efficiency for the CIP project.
Yes, absolutely. So and it's in process now, right? We have the Ready Keiki initiative with Lieutenant Governor Luke. We make that information available to them from this platform, and it feeds into the Ready Keiki site. And so we're working out some of the kinks, but that could happen. We could replicate that for other projects, where if there was a Ready Keiki or a new school site where it would automatically feed into that. Some of it seems automatic, but somebody is inputting it. And we hope that the systems will eventually talk to each other and not have to have a manual input.
Right. Is the data from the platform for the Ready Keiki currently available online, or?
It's on the Ready Keiki site, and
Is
that
it?
should be a day or two delayed at most.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you again for being here. You referenced in your slide that for the early learning expansion, you need 405 classrooms. I understand that information is from last year, so that's dated. But are you taking into account the preschool open doors expansion? Because with preschool open doors, obviously the provider is providing the physical space, and so Or do you mean that you're also going to be renovating facilities for preschool open doors in that program?
Yeah, so great question and great comment. So right now we're treating this as build for a client. So our two clients currently is EOEL and also charter schools, right? So we wanna do it client based. Your question about expanding other spaces, I think leads to where Yuko was going. We have a MOA with UH, and there was another drop number 6 today. So they're beginning the building of 7 classrooms on the NOAA project. So those type of MOAs are in place. We're working with state libraries for the Waikoloa and maybe Kaneohe MOA to fund the 2 new classrooms in each of those projects. So we'll continue to do those projects when EOEL, and if it all goes well with this legislation, starts to move into other public sites and we survey county site. So the counties have all reached out to us, right? They've said, hey, we have a space here, we have a space there. So we have a list of places that they're offering us. And then we would run that by EOEL for their access and opportunity index to make sure we're building or remodeling in the right spots. So we hope to do that. And if preschool open doors and there are other public facilities where people want to operate, we would do that. Yesterday we spoke with Laiopua in Kona on Hawaii Island that wants to expand 2 classrooms on DHHL property that the county of Hawaii wants to operate. So we continue to find new partners and get those MOAs through the AG to make sure we're within the law and then do the work.
Okay, so it's for public side. Okay, thank you so much. Can you kind of articulate further what the delineation between your responsibility and that of DOE facilities? You have said that you are instructed for certain projects. There's no statutory provisions that say that you have to build a particular project, but are you communicating with the DOE as to what projects you're moving forward with? It's still, to me, very unclear.
Yeah, and it has been a little awkward, right? So what has been nice is doing the pre-K expansion. So that forced us to have conversations. The DOE, the schools that we have done are operated by the DOE. There's students on there now. So we started the process going through a DOE review that since has moved where the DOE no longer reviews. So we changed that process again. We tried to follow what they did so that we don't mess up their operations. They need to know when contractors on board, what gates to use, keys, all of those protocols. In terms of the CIP projects, we continue to reach out to the DOE for only 2 projects, right? The SFA statutorily must build what's assigned to us by the legislature, the governor, or the Board of Education. And so the 2 projects assigned is for Central Maui and for East Kapolei. We continue to reach back to the DOE. They're doing some, from what I understand, for East Kapolei, they restarted the process of doing some of their internal reviews. And their last meeting was on December 8th, where they asked me to be on standby and then said they didn't need me until further notice. So that's about a month and a half ago. But we want to pick up. I hope that answers your question, or you might have.
How is this assignment process articulated?
How's the
assignment process?
It came out in statute, right? Here's 10 million for.
I mean, specifically,
million or
like you
10
said,
million.
that it's going to be either the board or the legislature. Like, what is the process for the legislature directing a particular project?
Yeah, so the monies, these last 2 projects were appropriated, bills that were appropriated, monies for Central Maui and for East Kapolei. It kind of stops there, right? So we can't guess, right? We can't guess what the data is for the area and who's monitoring that data. It has been suggested that we do our own study, SFA do their own study just this week. So I'll take it to my board, and if that's where we need to go, we'll do a study in the Core Ridge area in Ho'opili. But there's been a lot of conversation in the past, and if we got to start all over again, that will certainly slow us down a bit, but we need to start.
So it's through the bills specifically?
What's assigned?
Or the budget. Okay, thank you very much. And has SFA thought through how they communicate with the department, with EOEL, in terms of like coordinating expansion or where there is demand for a particular type of project that you're building?
Right, great. Yes. So if we use the model we created with EOEL and the DOE, we started to meet every Tuesday, and then we we changed it to every other Tuesday, and I think that's where we're at right now. We've canceled a few when there was some stagnant, or we were in the midst of projects and didn't add any new projects. We would want to use that same type of work group. So for a new school work group and a teacher housing or educator housing work group would probably be the best way, where all parties come to the table regularly.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Is it thank you for sharing that. Is it part of your scope to, as you assess a new build, to look at, this was brought up the other day with Rep. Martin, because our demographics are changing. There are areas of new growth, there are areas where the population has gone down, and there are schools that are being underutilized. But for those areas, are you currently, is that part of your scope to model, look at the changing demographics and projections on what the demand would be for a new school?
Right. So the wording isn't exactly like that in legislation, but I mean, that goes without saying. You must do it. So Central Maui, as soon as we received funding, we got out to Maui, started to talk to some of the community, reached out to some of our representatives there. Immediately found that, so in the Central Maui area, in Wailuku area, Pu'ukukui, you can visibly see it's over capacity. There's plenty students. And then you go a couple miles up the road and you go to Wailuku and it's visibly empty. It used to have 1,000 students, it's 500. So that alone tells you how do you begin building another school when we still haven't leveled these two schools out. There's a lot of GEs into Pu'ukukui and a lot of space in Wailuku. So you must do that work. And I won't take credit for this. The DOE began working with some groups that do that. MK Think is one of them that we work with on the pre-K expansion, and they have that data statewide. They have a chart, it's beautiful. They borrowed some of the charts from previous studies, the Jacobs study and the Hallstrom study. There's been a lot of studies. And so they brought all these data points together and shared that data with us. Now, having the data is one thing, doing something with it and having the tough conversations around where to actually build is what comes next.
Two more questions. Is SFA currently involved in the new study? I know we have studies upon studies of the Oreo study.
We haven't. I heard about it. Somebody texted me a few weeks ago, said, we have another study, Oreo. I said, well, great. I hope the data helps us to drive what we really need to do. We haven't been a part of that study.
And then I know you haven't released the strategic plan yet, but given the success of the speed at which we were able to get the 11 classrooms going and fast track the permitting process and keep it under budget, how has that informed kind of the strategic direction in your strategic plan? Is there any kind of highlights you can share with us on how you're using kind of, either the lessons learned and how we can really, I see the intent of the authority and how we can maximize your, agency, in types of replicating a lot of these successes?
Yeah, so we can share with you our strategic plan. In fact, we have it. We'll give you a hard copy. It's very pretty. But to your question about the data, yes, it's been very, very successful, and it hasn't been successful because of SFA. It has been successful because of Ready Keiki. It has been successful because the Lieutenant Governor really pushed hard and brought all the agencies and departments together. So I would say the success is where there is will and there is true collaboration is where you see speed, where you see under budget, right? And that needs to continue to happen. And it needs to happen not in my opinion, from what we've seen, it needs to happen on all of these projects. Collaboration, not competition.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Members, any other questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry I had to step out earlier for another meeting, but your slides mentioned East Kapolei High School. So $15 million was passed last year state budget for the East Kapolei High School. What's the timeline looking like as far as breaking ground? I think last month 100,000 was released for a feasibility study for that. So what's the update on that?
Yeah, so two different things, right? There's monies allocated for the design of this school. I think what's been slow up into this point has been the work on Farrington Highway, right? So there was monies released, I want to say 7 years ago, but I have to double check that. And there has been, a firm was awarded contract and they started some work on that. Gets us to this point, seems like the road on Farrington Highway is okay. Now we have some monies. Once we get the work that's already been done, because the site has been selected, we can begin to design, release this monies for design. Typically, I don't want to say typically, because it's taken a long time to build schools. I would estimate that this, if using the processes that we have now, we could do it in half the typical time, so maybe 7, 8, 9 years. It would take from studies to completion of at least the first phase of construction. And second part of your question is, if this construction is done in phases with all the entitlements done up front, you could see increased speed.
Okay. And then, so the DOE mentioned this week there are 2 parcels that they have locked in already. So that's certain. You guys have the land, know where it's going, and that's across UH West Oahu.
It's further up from UH West Oahu. You might be thinking, we've heard that the DOE has done some work around varying sites given to the state or obtained by the state in lieu of for elementary and middle schools as well. So the high school parcel would be further up off on that stretch of Farrington Highway.
Okay.
That was agriculture up into this
Okay.
point, and it backs up towards the freeway.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then lastly, the Ho'opili school, the elementary school. So $4 million was released. The planning construction, I think it was 2 years ago now. So any update on that?
Yeah, so that may be a test project if done in phases of legislation that could assign monies to the SFA, which would force us to work with the DOE to collaborate on this. At this point, this is the DOE project, and us trying to get involved with procuring part of it would slow them down. We're
Okay,
not.
so the DOE says it's on you guys, and you're saying it's...
Yeah, the elementary, we haven't had funding through legislation for that project. Yes, yet.
Okay.
And I'll be clear, should you assign that to us, we will begin work on it.
Okay, well, I think it's much needed. There'll be thousands of families there in the next 10 years.
Yeah, there are already. There are already.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Representative. And so for East Kapolei School, the $15 million, is it on the lapse list?
No, it's not.
It is not.
Central Maui, though,
Okay.
that one is.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, recess. Thank you very much. Reconvening for our last department of the day, we have the Hawaii State Charter School Commission. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Aloha, Chair Woodson, Vice Chair LaChica, I believe is around, Representative Martin. I'm here today. I'm PJ4, the Interim Executive Director for the State Public Charter School Commission. I have Chair Kathy Ikeda, our chairperson, also joining us, and Deanne Goya, our Early Learning Director, who is here also. So I am not going to walk through a presentation. I did submit some late submittal, and I apologize for that. That has some areas and information that I'd like to refer to. And I'm just going to go through that pretty quickly. I believe it's 6 pages plus a few pages of tables after that. So overall, looking at this will be in reference to the budget information around EDN 600 and EDN 612. That's the key part of the fiscal portion of the charter schools. Within your information, if you take a look at the submittal, there is an overview of our mission statement, the work we do, the 37 schools, et cetera. There is some reference to, on page 2 and 3, around our statewide conditions, but also our charter school performance measures. There's some links there to our annual report, which does have specific school data that you can reference and take a look at there if you're so inclined. But really, I'd like to focus on, beginning on bottom of page 3 and over on page 4 is the budget portion of this. So for fiscal year, for this portion of the biennium coming up, there's a couple pieces that I want to point out for you. You can also see these on table 6, which is on page 7 of your information. So you'll see in the proposed executive budget, there's an increase in funding of $1.6 million for fiscal year 25. That is to cover the salary increases for EAs and vice principals. It was brought to our attention that were negotiated through the bargaining units. And so that was put into the budget for fiscal year 24-25. As far as the other portion, you'll see a $550,000 allocation for teacher differentials. $2 million, I believe, was put into appropriation in years past through our survey of schools and our conversations with BNF. That $550,000 covers the shortfall that's coming up in the upcoming year with regards to teacher differentials. That is specifically for hard-to-staff schools and Hawaiian language schools, I believe. So that's what that money's for. There's a almost 2 million allocation. Actually, it's closer to 1 million. 1 million allocation for the new school that was approved for opening by commissioners. It opens in school year 24-25. That's Kulia Academy, servicing Kalihi area. It is a project-based school with a focus on science and AI. So that will be a school to keep an eye on. And that $1 million is an allocation for opening costs for that school. There is, you'll see, a per pupil adjustment placeholder of $12 million. That was put in by BNF. We did not ask for that, but it was put in there as a placeholder, depending on what happens with the Department of Education and their budget lines, EDN 100, 200, 300, and 400. So with regards to the formula and the formulaic approach to how we fund, depending on what happens with the budget for the Department of Education.
How are you defining that placeholder?
It's there in case something happens to those line items with EDNs 1 through 400. So depending on what happens with the Department of Education's budget, that will impact the charter school overall budget. So BNF approached us and said, we're putting this in there because of you've had some increasing enrollment, depending on how numbers look like, this could be coming into play. So it's kind of a there.
Okay, I'll ask you about it later, but please continue.
Okay. So other than that, as far as appropriations or allocations go, that's it for EDN 600. For EDN 612, which is the charter school office budget, we don't have any new asks. There is an increase in the appropriation. That's due to our work with Ready Keiki and opening 30 new early learning classrooms. But other than that, we don't have any other big pieces, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for being here. Questions? Okay, so I'll continue with the placeholder. And so per the statutory formula, right, that's like an input and then it spits out an output in dollars. But what do you mean when you say placeholder?
I'm not exactly sure. Danny works with BNF directly, Danny Vasconcelos, and he happens to be at a financial training right now, but I can find that out and get back to you. I don't know exactly why it was placed in there, but I know that Danny has had conversations with budget and finance, and they have a more cogent reason than I'm giving you right now.
Okay.
Well, I can find that out and get that back to you.
Yes, please.
Okay.
And so with regards to collective bargaining and fringe benefits for our charter schools, has there been money that has been allocated to the commission to give to charter schools through the Department of Education?
For collective bargaining, I believe there was an allocation. That's what the 1.6 million is for through collective bargaining for HGEA, I believe, for vice principals and assistants. So yes.
Okay, I guess.
Maybe I'm not understanding that question.
Well, no, it was because I wasn't clear. And so I mean specifically like through the statute, is there provisions in the statute that say that collective bargaining and fringe is to be covered?
Is to be covered.
Let me reference it more specifically. And so
302D what?
In Hawaii Revised Statute 302D-28, subsection B, it does state that BNF is to allocate fringe benefits to the commission based upon what the appropriation is, but it does not say that the department has to give that money to the schools. And so I was wondering if you know that if there's any provisions that specifically say that the money that's appropriated to the Department of Education to give to the charter school commissions, to give to the schools, is in statute.
Not that I'm aware of, but I'll have to explore that. I'm wishing Danny was here at this point, but he's not. He has a deeper understanding of that process. I can find out more and get back to you. I do know that that conversation has come up with some of our schools. I can say that any funds for collective bargaining that are allocated to our office go to the schools. But is there a statutory requirement? I'll have to read through that more deeply and get back to you on that.
Okay, we'll look into it also, but we're just seeking
Okay.
clarification. And also, I guess just specifically regarding collective bargaining, you know, we know in that same provision of 302D-28, broadly speaking, that there is mechanisms for adjustments to go to the commission, to go to the charter schools. But do you know if there's a specific provision for collective bargaining?
I do not off the top of my head. I believe it is mentioned in the statute, but I don't know off the top of my head which part it is.
When there is collective bargaining that's appropriated through the Department of Education to the charter schools, sometimes the funding gets to the schools a year to a year and a half after the fact. How do the charter schools float the money to pay for those additional costs?
Unfortunately, they use reserves, is what my understanding is. You would have to ask each separate school because they each have their own governing board that decides on how they allocate their finances. However, they do have to float those costs. Okay. So some schools, from my understanding, and some schools choose to pay it immediately and get the reimbursement later, or get the allocation later when it comes out or when it's approved. Other schools, I believe, hold on to it. And again, that is the governing board's choice. They're able to wait until they get the funds, and then they distribute them.
Does each school have a designated set aside required by the commission?
Required by the commission?
Like savings?
No. The commission does not require schools to set aside funds.
Okay. In your testimony that you provided, you said that you have received $10.2 million in federal funds and you only spent 804,000 of them. Can you talk about that?
So if you look at the federal funds annual report, there's a breakdown. So there's a link to the federal funds annual report. There's a breakdown to how those funds were specifically allocated. I believe the 800,000 is around our MOU with the Department of Education. The 10.2 million, the reason is the 10.2 million goes back to schools. That's my understanding, but I need to clear that up for you. I'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
But that annual report, the federal fund annual report, that's a link there in the document, that will specify all the funds and the breakdown of where the federal funds went. That's also in our annual report.
Thank you. And do you know, with regards to your request for the funding for differential pay, the incentive pay, you said that is 550,000 for shortfall, specifically for Hawaiian immersion and hard to fill. Is there a statutory requirement that says that the department is to give that money to the Charter School Commission to give to the schools?
I don't know if there's a statutory requirement that says the DOE needs to give that to the schools. I believe, no, I don't know, and I don't want to misspeak, so I'll have to find that out.
Okay. So with all these funding shortfalls, I'm just wondering how the charter schools themselves are able to operate.
That is a challenge for our schools, particularly around some of the areas of facilities and finding facilities and the expense of facilities and upkeep. That is a challenge that our schools have expressed to us at the commission staff level. It is something we continue to work with the schools about what we can do as an authorizer and bring forward to various agencies to see what support we can have.
And the statute does actually articulate that facilities funding may be appropriated by the Department of Education to the Charter School Commission. Does the commission have conversations with DOE to provide facilities funding for the charter schools?
Not that I'm aware of right now. I think what we do work with the Department of Education on is with our conversion schools, our 6 conversion schools. And also we do ask about any facilities that are underused to see if some of our charter schools may be able to work with them on that.
Thank you so much. In your testimony, you stated that for charter schools overall, proficiency is at 14%. Then you go on to say that math proficiency is at 14%, language arts is at 19%, and science proficiency system-wide is at 30%. Is there different proficiency rates between the charter schools and the traditional DOE schools?
So the 14% is 14% of the schools, which comes out to about 5 schools, met or exceeded both state and charter averages for math. So that's 5 schools that excelled above the state and charter average for both. 19% were ahead in language arts of the state or charter. So here, let me break this down. That means 5 schools that had both of those, right?
Yeah.
And then only 19% met or exceeded both state and charter averages in language arts, and 30% of the schools met or exceeded both in science. So if the cutoff is, say, I believe the state average was 52% for language arts, it went up. So we have one school that was not, their information or data was suppressed because of size. And then we have 11 schools, 11 of the 36 then, because you take one away, were beyond the 52% threshold for the state average.
Okay.
Right? And then that was for language arts. For math, 10 of the 36 schools were above the 40% benchmark of the state average. And in science, 12 of 32 schools, because there were 5 schools that had their data suppressed due to size. And so 12 of the 32 schools exceeded the statewide 40% average. A number of our schools did show growth this past year in performance. I don't have that exact number in front of me, but one of the things the commissioners are looking at is growth. So yes, some of our schools are performing at a low average, but there are a number of them that are demonstrating a positive trend at this point.
Okay. And when you say data suppression, do you mean per the ESSA requirement? It defined as if the sample size is too small, you do not have to report
Correct.
it? Okay.
Correct. The N size is too small, and we have,
In size, yeah.
yeah, we have a few schools that are pretty small.
Okay. And per your benchmarks or your academic standard, are they the same as the DOE schools, or are you looking at different standards?
So the benchmarks that we're referring to here are the Strive High results, right? And
They're
so
Strive
that's the state Strive High results. We do have in contract 4.0, the latest version of a contract, opportunities for schools. They are required to have a mission-aligned initiative. And they also have the opportunity to include school-specific measures that are related directly to their mission and their vision. And so now, as of this year, as of last Thursday, we have all of our schools on contract 4.0. So we will be including more school-specific measures in upcoming reports.
Thank you. And do you know, with regards to the assessments that are tied to Strive High, those particular schools that are Hawaiian and median or immersion, is that assessment or are those assessments given in English or in Hawaiian?
There is the opportunity to take Ka'eo, I believe, which is the Hawaiian language assessment. Right, that's there. Yeah, it's in Hawaiian. Yeah, it's in Hawaiian. So the Ka'eo is our schools have the opportunity to take that. I think the one school that's particularly a little bit problematic is our Ni'iha language school, which the assessment is in Olelo, Hawaii, and the students are all taught in Olelo Ni'ihau. So there's some nuances that are different. So that's the one school that's pretty problematic in that area.
Are you working with that school?
Yes.
For the
Well, they're
assessment?
working on their school-specific measures and their mission-aligned initiative as to how to perpetuate the Ni'ihau language, yes.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Or member, any questions? Sorry, go
Yes,
ahead.
Chair.
Everyone's gone.
Thank you. In your testimony, you said that you were given 27.6 million from ARPA ESSER funds. So similar to our question to the DOE, I believe they still have about 20% they need to expend through September of 2024. Do you know what percentage you're at for the 27.6?
I don't know that number, but I know Danny does have that number, and I can get that information back to you. I believe our schools are doing a good job. I think there's still some expenditures to be made, but they are on target to expend it.
By September?
Ye-
Okay. Of this,
Yes,
yeah, by the end
yes,
of this.
by September. But I can get that number back to you.
Okay, thank you. And then director, is there a timeline for when the executive director position will be filled or be made permanent? Can you, sorry,
answer that?
I want to.
Yep, so we went through the process and we're actually publicly announcing it on the 25th of this month.
By the 25th of this month. Okay, thank you. Okay. I have a couple questions relating to performance measures. I know in your testimony, you had indicated that you are changing or updating some performance measures specifically for budgetary measures of effectiveness and performance measures for EDN 600 or 612. And then in relation to that, I was just looking up some background data. Are you aware of the Nexus Authorizer Evaluation Report that was released in December in 2022?
The NACSA?
Yeah, yes, that's that
Okay.
one, the national, yeah. So are there any, based on their report and their recommendations, which some were very specific to updating performance measures for the commission as well as ongoing training for the commission. The first part of the question is, Did you take that into account as you develop new performance measures? And then the second part of that question is, are you budgeting for any type of these improvements for, operation funds for like the training and ongoing evaluation of commissioners?
So the NACSA report, I believe, came kind of after 4.0 was already being drafted, and we had spent a lot of time on that. However, what we've been looking at the short-term recommendations and actually putting those into place, and it's woven into the revised strategic plan and the benchmarks. And then we're currently looking at those longer-term recommendations. So as far as commissioner training, we were able to send more commissioners to NACSA to the federal conference, and we're gonna kind of continue that. We have priority for commissioners that are new to actually do like a boot camp kind of thing on authorizing, etc. So yes, we do really look closely at that evaluation as well as the Board of Education evaluation and recommendations.
So you've taken into account the recommendations provided in the NACSA report in your current strategic plan. Is that correct?
The revision, we're just seeing that it's actually aligned. So the things that they're telling us to do, we have been doing it. It's part of the continuous improvement.
Okay, and then the recommendations to have, additional training or create a new process for evaluation, that's currently already being done, and there's no new additional requests for funding for those.
No, within our own operating budget right now, we're able to meet those needs. So we just continue, making sure we have the permanent ED will allow us to, or not allow us to, but gives us the foothold to begin the process of re-examining the strategic plan. So we're in year 3 of the attain, maintain, sustain portion. So we're actually having a meeting to analyze the data that we've gathered over the last year and be able to then use our spiral inquiry process, make some hunches, and look at the next steps based on what we're observing from our data that we've gathered from school performance. And then we'll look at then how does that impact the work we're doing in the office to effectively monitor schools and ensure high quality.
Do you have a timeline for, as you're doing that type of analysis, when you can share those with us by?
Well, I don't have a specific time. I mean, we're in year 3, so as year 3 starts to close to an end, we should have it, I would say, by the end of session. We also want to honor the new executive director and ensure that they have time to take a look at that plan process. If they have insights as to how they would like the commission to move, they'll have that opportunity as well. We'd like to be respectful of that as well.
Can you share what those new performance measures are that you said in your testimony? What is being measured, and then
share them with you. Get them to you.
Yeah, with chair. Yeah,
yes.
And then you can share those with us. And then the final question is, as you were sharing with us the performance, for the statewide conditions, are you able to analyze that against, kind of look at the performance like over time? I don't know, with the 37 schools, what's an appropriate time to look back and like kind of see, the percentage and as compared to like the state average? Is that, I don't know how far
We
back
have that. It's actually in the annual report. So there's 3 years of data.
Okay.
Maybe more, 3 years at least of
In the
data
the one that's
in the
linked
annual
here.
report
Okay.
that's linked there. If you go to that, it's like page 222, I think, and you have all 37 schools and their performance data listed.
Over time. Okay.
Yes, it's over time.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair. Seeing no other questions, we will adjourn. I want to thank all of our presenters for being here today. It's good information, and we will now move forward. Thank you. Adjourn.
Thank you.